Hello, folks. How are we? Cinco de Mayo. A bunch of you are on the whiteboard, which is great. Bree's even maybe drawing a little picture of a flower. We'll give it a couple minutes for people to kind of get settled in. I'm going to write a little question on the board. We'll rock and roll. Awesome. Okay, let's get started here. I'm sure a couple people will join, and some people can only watch later on. That's fine. First of all, hello. Good to see you all. Jaren, nice. You're skateboarding. So you can skateboard and do math at the same time. Pretty impressive. What we want to accomplish today is to be able to use what we know about algebra to solve word problems. So I'm going to just give you a few examples, and your whiteboards today will be used to do the math kind of component, and I'm going to show you the steps that we want to take in order to be able to solve these. So whenever you're dealing with a word problem in the umbrella of algebra, we're going to look at these 4 steps right here. So I'm going to read them out to you, and tomorrow when you have a chance to show me a couple of these, I'll always give you these steps to kind of guide you through doing that. So first one says, create a variable in relation to the problem, which also means let x equal. So first we're going to say, what do we not know? And that will be x. Second is create an equation. So the algebra that we've been doing so far, I've given you an equation and you have to solve that equation. In this situation, you have to actually create that equation first based on the question and then solve it. Step 3 is solve the equation. And step 4 is write a sentence answer or give some explanation of what you've accomplished so you can actually say, okay, this is my answer, not just random numbers everywhere. Kind of be clear and concise of the answer that you are giving. So let's go through this question here. Tom and Linda both like to eat saltwater taffy. Tom ate 1 more than twice what Linda ate. If Tom ate 21 pieces, how many did Linda eat? So there we go. We're starting with a word problem. Now I'm going to give you some strategies here to solve this. So what we're going to do here in this first example is I'm going to give you the equation, and I'm going to work through that equation with you. The next question I write up, we're going to see if you can do it on your own. So first step is create a variable in relation to the problem. So let x equal. We need to figure out what we do not know. And a little tip for you is typically what we do not know is kind of given at the end of the story here. So in this case, how many did Linda eat? Okay, we do not know how many Linda ate, because it's asking for that information. So in order to solve for step 1 here, I'm going to write down Linda is equal to x. So whenever we see the x in our equation that we generate, that's going to talk about Linda. Linda is going to be x. We do not know how many pieces Linda ate. Okay? Step 2 says create an equation. Now, whenever we're looking at word problems, oftentimes we're given information that's just kind of setting the stage for the question. It doesn't really give us any information on the math that we need to do. So in this particular example, it says Tom and Linda both like to eat saltwater taffy. That's great. Good to know. Good job, Linda and Tom. Sometimes I like saltwater taffy as well. Does that really give us any information to solve a question? No, it's just kind of saying, it's giving some background information. So I could actually kind of just cross that off and say, we don't need to worry about that. That's just information. Tom ate one more than twice what Linda ate. Okay, this right here, Tom ate one more than twice what Linda ate, is going to be the root of our equation. Okay, there's a lot of information there. Now, what we need to think about is in algebra, we're looking at this idea of kind of working backwards. We need to identify the math terms in this equation. So if I look at this, Tom ate one more. This is a kind of a math phrase. And twice is another math phrase. So if I can identify the math phrases in the sentence in the word problem, that's a great strategy for us. If I say one more than twice, how could I represent that as an equation? One more than twice. Well, if I think about one more, I could probably write that as plus 1. Okay? If I have one more than somebody, I can write that as plus 1. One less than somebody would be minus 1. Twice, if I'm talking about something twice, that's double or 2 times an amount. So I could write that as 2 times an amount. So times by 2 maybe. Now, if we think about algebra specifically, we need to think about how we typically see these questions come up. And we're usually going to see the multiplication piece before the addition piece when I'm writing an equation out. Now, twice is going to be something that's multiplied by 2, okay? And adding 1 is going to be plus 1. So how would I write this equation? I would actually take that information and say 2x plus 1. Tom ate one more than twice. So we need to double a number first, and then we can add one more. Now, this is step number 2, create an equation. This is the toughest part. If we can get to here, then we're going to have a good chance of finishing this question off, right? And this is the practice that we need to take. So being able to go from our sentence and be able to extract the kind of the math-like terms and say, how can we represent one more than twice? And with algebra, you kind of have to think that backwards mentality, right? Number 3 says solve the equation. Well, this is just an expression, so we're not quite there. If we want to turn this into an equation, we need to write down an equal sign. There's one more little piece of information here that'll help us create the equation. So Tom ate one more than twice what Linda ate. So this statement here is from this sentence. If Tom ate 21 pieces, that's the last piece of information we need for our equation. So 2x plus 1 is equal to, well, 21. This is Tom, and this is how many pieces that he ate. Now, if we're looking for Linda, Linda is x. So how do we solve this? We need to solve for x just like we've done in the past. So step 3 is, well, I need to solve for x. I subtract 1 from both sides, and I'm left with 2x, these cancel out, equals 20. Divide both sides by 2, and I'm left with x is equal to 20 divided by 2, which is 10. Okay, now what does x represent? Well, x is Linda. So the question is asking how many did Linda eat? For step 4, I would just say Linda 8, 10 saltwater taffies. And that would be a great solution. So as you can see, it's a little bit tricky to be able to come up with the equation, but that's something we need to practice. So we're going to do another example here. And this time I'm going to see if you can work through it on your whiteboard, and I will walk you through it after I give you some time. So get your whiteboards ready, and I will write down the next question right here. So Ralph is 3 more, than twice his sister's age. If Ralph is 9, how old is his sister? Okay, once again, I'll read it. And away we go. Ralph is 3 more than twice his sister's age. If Ralph is 9, how old is his sister? So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the steps. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I know your whiteboards are small, so on your whiteboards, if you can't squeeze everything in, really working on finding this equation and then solving. So as you work, I'm going to be able to kind of look at your whiteboards here on my TV, and I'll see if we're on the right track or where we need to be helped. I'll help you with the first one. It says create a variable in relation to the problem. So x equal, well, in this case, how old is Ralph's sister? That's what we want to know. So Ralph's sister would be x. All right, let's see if you can come up with an equation here. You're looking at this 3 more and twice. Oh, nice. I'm seeing some good things here. Some of you are putting +3 before twice. We want to actually rearrange it so the multiplication piece comes first. It'll just help with the organization. Not necessary, but I think it's a little bit nicer to work that way. Love it. I'm seeing some great things. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to kind of keep working just so we have time to do 1 or 2 more examples here. And you can always go back, obviously, and watch this video later on and go back and double check some of your stuff to make sure that you have this concept down pat. So step 2 is create an equation. Ralph is 3 more than twice his sister's age. So we have this idea of 3 more, and we have this idea of twice. Ugh, maybe if I sit down, it's better for you. the equation is going to come from 3 more and twice. Now, the way that we see algebra and the way that we've been working with it, we're going to actually do the multiplication piece first. So twice is going to be represented by 2x. We have Ralph's sister, and we're going to double that, and we're going to add 3. So 2x plus 3 is going to be Ralph. And that is going to equal, Ralph is 9. So that is the equation that we're looking for, which a number of you have got, which is amazing. Okay, then we need to solve it. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. And we're going to be left with 2x is equal to 6. Divide each side by 2. And x is equal to 6 divided by 2, which is 3. Hello, Keenan. Okay, now, once we get an answer, we're looking to just have the idea, because sometimes if we get an answer, there's more to do. And so that's why we need to make sure we have this idea of, okay, let's write a sentence, make sure we're looking for Ralph's sister. Ralph's sister is x. We've solved x is now 3, super satisfying. And we say Ralph's sister is 3 years old. Okay, that would be an awesome, well done question, which a lot of you got, and some of you even managed to sneak the sentence down on your whiteboard, which is tough, but you guys are getting really creative with typing, and who knows what you're doing on your phones or iPads or computers, whatever you got going on there. It's been awesome to watch. I'm just going to do a little once over of the whiteboards and see if I can find any mistakes that have popped up. Oh, whenever we are writing a variable with a coefficient, or we're multiplying it, we're always just going to write the number before the variable. So we're going to see this as 2x instead of x2 or times 2. We want to switch that around. Okay. Love it. I see a lot of good things there. Perfect. Okay. I'll erase this one and I'll write one more up here and see if we can kind of tweak it a little bit, because it's not always addition that we're working with or multiplication that we're working with. Okay, so Gary, spends $40 less than 3 times what Cindy spent. If they spent $400 altogether, how much did each person spend? Don't know why I capitalized that A. Okay, so this is a little bit of a tweak, and I'm just going to walk you through this one. And one more step that we kind of skipped in the first 2 questions, that because it was kind of simple. This one is important to see this word all together, and I'll explain why that's important. So if we go back to step 1 here, it says create a variable in relation to the problem. Let x equal. What we've been doing with creating the equation is we've kind of said, hey, we're gonna let x equal something, and then we're going to define every other person or thing in terms of x. So in this one, we need to do that specifically. Gary spends $40 less than 3 times what Cindy spent. If they spent $400 altogether, how much did each person spend? So right now, we are looking for the answer to the question, how much did each person spend? Well, we don't actually know how much Gary spent or how much Cindy spent. So we have to define them both kind of in terms of x. Well, in this case, we're going to have Cindy be X because we don't know anything about her. So for step 1, Cindy is going to equal X. If Cindy is X, how can we define Gary? Well, that's where kind of the expression needs to come out of Gary. Gary spends $40 less than 3 times what Cindy spent. So if Cindy is X, Gary is $40 less than 3 times. So how would we represent $40 less than 3 times? We would represent that as 3x minus 40. Okay, so we need to take Cindy, we need to multiply that by 3 and then subtract 40. So this one's a little bit of a tweak, but it's important to be able to extract that information. $40 less than 3 times. Okay, now we need to create an equation. This is the key word here, all together. If something is happening all together, that means that we need to put them together. Okay, everybody is coming together. So our equation here is going to be Cindy, who is X, and Gary, who is 3x minus 40. They need to be added together. Okay, this is a little bit tricky. So Gary is 3x minus 40. And we have to add Cindy, who is represented by X. All right, so 3x minus 40 plus X is equal to, well, together they spent $400. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Now, here's an equation that we have looked at in the tips and tricks. If we have 3x and another x, we can put them together. We can kind of add like terms. So I would actually rewrite this equation or work on solving it by saying 3x plus x is 4x minus 40 is equal to 400. Okay. Here's one of the mistakes that people make when this type of question is happening. We forget to add the people together. So as soon as you see this word all together, that's a tip. So 4x minus 40 is equal to 400. Now I can solve this equation, this two-step equation. So I'm going to add 40 to each side, add 40 to each side, and I'm left with 4x is equal to 400 plus 40, which is 440. Now I'm going to divide by 4. And I know I'm going through this part really, really quickly. The reason being is because we've worked on this. Okay, we're building up. So if you're missing out on the steps here, you got to go back and you need to watch some of my videos from before. I can cancel this out. 440 divided by 4 is equal to 110. Now, how much did each person spend is the question. We just figured out X. Who was X to start with? Cindy. Okay, so Cindy. So now in order to answer this question, Cindy spent $110 because she is X. We've solved that. Okay. And Gary, well, Gary was 3x minus 40. So how do we figure out how much Gary spent? Well, 3 times x, right? And if I do that here, I'll do it in the black marker over here. So I substitute x in, just like we're checking our work. 3 times 110 minus 40. Well, 3 times 110 is 330 minus 40 is going to be 290. Okay, thanks, Alexa. That was awesome. So, and Gary spent $290. Now, to double check to make sure that we have this right, 110 plus 290 altogether, that should equal 400. So 110 plus 290 does equal 400. So we've done that correctly. Okay. So that type of question is a little bit more challenging because we actually have to take two people and add them together. So this is the next step of kind of that algebra, that complex algebra that we need to be able to do. 3x plus x gives me 4x. Or I could have rewritten this as x plus 3x minus 40. That would be okay too. All right. So that is algebra word problems. I know there's more variations, but that's kind of the skeleton of how we need to solve them and some strategies for you. All right. Now I'm going to write down one more on the board, and that's going to kind of piggyback off this one. If you or when you finish that one, then you can be done for the day for math. Okay. So similar to what we just did with Gary and Cindy. Sarah, write your question in the comments, and I'll answer it when you type it. Okay, so Fred is 1 less than 4 times as old as Pebbles. Great names here. All together. Their ages total 34. How old is each person? Okay, so there is another question, the last one for today, and that is going to be very similar to what we just did. So we need to think about who is going to be X, who do we not know anything about, how can we define the other person in terms of X, and then we're going to solve for the rest of the question. So Fred is 1 less than 4 times as old as Pebbles. We know information about Fred. We don't know anything about Pebbles. So who's going to be X? And then how are we going to explain the other person? I'll give you a bit of a jump start here, and then I'll work through this one, and we'll be done. Sarah, nice. Pebbles is X, absolutely. Nice. P for Pebbles. I see a couple of you doing. So Pebbles equals X, and Fred equals what? Fred is going to equal 1 less than 4 times. So 4x, 1 less minus 1. Then we need to add these together. So Pebbles, so x plus, because it's all together. Oops, got the R here. All together. X plus 4x minus 1 is equal to a total of 34. This is a big word, important word. If you get a decimal here, it means that we did one little mistake along the way, and I bet you it's this step here. So we have to say they're all together, their ages are 34. So we need to add x plus 4x. We can't just leave it as 4x minus 1. We have to add pebbles as well because it's all together. So this becomes x plus 4x minus 1. X and 4x become 5x. Minus 1 is equal to 34. And from there, we can solve, adding 1 to both sides. And divide both sides by 5. X is equal to 7. So what is x? X is Pebble's age. So to solve this, I can't just leave it as x equals 7 because I need to know how old is each person. So Pebbles is 7 years old. And Fred, well, Fred is 4x minus 7. So what was x? X was 7. So 4 times 7 minus 1, 28 minus 1. So Fred would then be 27 years old. Use my jacket. Now, if altogether they equal 34, then they should be total 20 or to 34. So 27 plus 7 does indeed give me 34, and I've solved this correctly. So that is fairly challenging. There's a couple different things that you need to pay attention to, and if we can kind of walk through the steps, it gives us a sense of if we're doing these questions correctly. Also, the questions that you're going to be dealing with at this level, 99% of the time are going to work out nice and neatly. So if you do end up with fractions or decimal answers, chances are you missed something along the way, probably adding the people together, something like that. Just make sure that you pay attention to those little details and just double check your work to make sure it comes out nice and neatly and it makes sense with the actual question that you're dealing with. Okay. So tomorrow I'm going to ship out a few questions to you that you're going to try on your own and use this video as a resource for you, and make sure you email or contact me in some way if you have any questions. All right. That's it. That's all. See you guys later. Bye.